G'day everyone, DJ Darks here. First off, I wanted to thank everyone for writing comments about today's topic in my last video. It's great to hear your opinions, and I'll use some of the info to help in supporting a lot of the points I'll be trying to make today. Also, I said in my blog video I'm back at university studying hard to become a real teacher. However, because of this, weekly 2DX discussion videos are going to have to move from weekly releases to once every 2 or 3 weeks. I apologise for skimping out on the discussion content, but I really want to ensure that the quality of future videos I'm putting out is consistent with others and still possesses the same amount of depth. In the coming weeks I'll have time to try and release some other content which you can watch to keep yourself entertained in between these bigger discussion videos. So thank you for being patient, and let's get on with today's 2DX discussion. So this is it guys, the big one. I recall back in 2006 after the Top Ranker tournament, someone posted on the forums asking, why did people use random in the Top Ranker tournament? This caused an explosion of comments resulting in a debate on whether using random was perfectly fine or going against what Konami intended. Of any 2DX option, it has fueled by far the most debate, and even after a decade later this same random versus non-random argument rages on. So I wanted to use this video to dish out the facts and put a nail in the coffin of this debate once and for all. In this video I wanted to not only give you guys the cold hard facts about random, but also convince you that you really should be using this option at all times. To support this, all high level players that I've spoken to in my interviews use random when they play, and I can also guarantee you that 99% of the current world records for songs were also done using random. This one option is probably the most important for assisting the majority of 2DX players to progress, and without it I probably wouldn't be at the level that I am today. So ever since I started playing 2DX, random has existed in the game. Now I don't know if it's always been a part of the game, but even as far back as 3rd Style, it was an option made available to players to shuffle around the lane order and in turn where the note patterns would be sit, excluding the turntable. As time went on, many other different random options were introduced to the game. Now there's a variety of randoms in the game which I'll try and cover very quickly. The first was S-Random, a random mode which completely shuffles the notes, so instead of just falling on the same lane the whole song, the order is completely jumbled, adding more jacks and chaos to the equation. The opposite side of this option is H-Random, formerly known as Samurai Random, which shuffles the chart like S-Random. It ensures that no notes over a 16th span can land on the same key, removing the possibility of jacks appearing in the chart. The newest addition to the option is R-Random, which keeps the note sequence the same, but shifts it forward or backwards by a certain number. So for example, if you have a scale going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, R-Random might shift the pattern along 1 and change this to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. For the sake of saving time, I'm going to branch all of these randoms under the same universal term for my argument, excluding H-Random, which I'll explain later. Now unlike many other music games where random is seen as a benefit within 2DX, it's seen as an optional challenge for other games to make the patterns more difficult. So why is this the case? The reason for this difference is when you compare other games to 2DX, you're very restricted in how you can physically play the game. For example, DDR you need 2 feet, and some patterns just don't join up well, forcing you to double step and costing you accuracy. In pop and music, 9 button patterns can only be hit so many ways with 2 hands, and random is basically exposing you to things which are physically impossible, which you'll ultimately miss. However, 2DX does not possess these physical limitations, as every pattern you can possibly be exposed to can be hit at any given time. I know a lot of people argue that you shouldn't be using random because the standard chart is the way in which Konami meant for the song to be played. To counter this argument, I wanted to go way back to the DDR days when people would argue that scores didn't count unless you played them all 1x no bar. Now if you put this mindset relative to something like 2DX, you can see just how absurd this argument is. Sure, some players like Lisu played 1x non-random on the 6 Style Tatsujin videos, however he admitted that this was a gimmick and he wasn't naturally playing this way when he played the game. Options such as random and high speeds are in the game to offer you a choice, and they don't make the game any harder or easier by adding or subtracting notes. Even if they do help you as an individual, it doesn't change the fact that every other person has the opportunity to do so, as well as obtain the same scores. Now for some options such as H-Random, which is capable of completely removing the challenge of songs as it can completely change the structure of charts, or Expanse Judge, where timing becomes much easier, it's understandable that scores don't save when using these options. However, something like random, which ultimately comes down to a gamble and your own personal level of skill, I see it as a perfectly reasonable option in the game, and this opinion is well justified by your score saving at the end of the song regardless of if you use it or not. It's like being a person who is offered a fork to eat a bowl of ramen noodles as opposed to using chopsticks, and you saying, "No thanks, I'm fine without that fork," then proceeding to suffer through your entire meal as you struggle to pick up those noodles. Random is a tool which is at your disposal to use as you wish. If you don't want to use it, then it's your choice. However, if that's the case, then you shouldn't complain to people when you do the 2DX progression equivalent of spilling noodles all down your shirt when a clear answer to your problem was offered from the very start. Now, of course, straying from a pattern that you are familiar with is scary, and this is the main reason why so many people give up so quickly on random as they try using it once or twice, see their scores spiral downwards and presume, it's not for me. It makes things much harder. However, I want to explain to you why this is a very important concept and why you should continue to try and use it. Pattern exposure. From my personal experience, I wanted to show you an example of how random can make things both easier and harder. Let's take Murmur Twins Hyper for example. When I started progressing up to 9s, I couldn't touch Murmur Twins at all, because at the time performing scales were a nightmare. It was around this time that I started using random. The first time I tried Murmur Twins using random, I cleared it. I got lucky and the random jumbled up the scale into a pattern I could easily handle just by alternating hands. I said, "This is awesome," and tried to use it on R5. The roll it gave me was horrible and I pretty much flatlined the whole thing. So as you can see, there's that element of risk versus reward, as random can potentially make a chart easier but also has the ability to give you patterns making the chart almost twice as hard. Although you might encounter some patterns which are easier, it comes down to exposing yourself to those patterns which are extremely difficult, such as butterflies, 1-2 rolls, that make you practice and get better at them. These things are quite uncommon in non-random charts and will be rarely seen or thrown at you. So what other reasons do we have to use it, I hear you say? Well, random is also statistically supported as a means to improve, and well, you can't argue with statistics now, can you? To begin with, let me give you some perspective on 2DX and how it's changed over the years. If you weren't already aware, 2DX is a game which has become increasingly harder over its lifespan. Gokkan once used an example where if you took the hardest chart from Resort Anthem, Perdidos Paradisius, and put it next to something like the Safari, considered one of the hardest songs in third style, there is absolutely no comparison between the two. This trend has continued from style to style, with each one offering more challenging songs than the last. However, it's interesting to know that even though the game has gotten harder over the years, the player base has also gradually increased in terms of skill. And certainly if you look at the global averages of a song which existed in third style and compared it to the averages across every style, you see that the average score for that song has steadily increased. Now, why is this the case? It's true that players may have continued playing over the years and gotten better over time, but you need to consider that this data also factors in new players who have been introduced to the game, and that many players may have retired, leading to a still very accurate representation of the 2DX population. The conclusion you can reach from this data is that over time, as more players have started playing the game, the rate of progression has also become much faster compared to the older styles. Now you need to ask what caused this rate of progression to increase. The answer lies in diversity. The reason for this is as each style comes out, another 100 or so songs gets added to the game, giving people more songs to play and in turn more exposure to charts and patterns which they hadn't experienced before. Think of this like trying to climb to the second floor using 4 1-meter steps as opposed to having 30 smaller ones. Even though the 4 steps are extremely challenging, they'd still get you there eventually. However, it's much harder to step up each one compared to when you have 30 steps where each level gives you a variety and opportunity to keep ascending with ease. So similarly in 2DX, we can compare the 909 songs currently in the game to the 200 or 300 available in a previous style, and you'll see the clear relationship between the number of charts available to the rate of progression. The reason for this is that with every song which gets added to the game, the difficulty curve becomes that little bit smoother, with new songs filling in those gaps by adding another milestone in the path of progression. It's for this reason that players like Exagon were able to get from beginner to Kaiden within a year, and produce some amazing scores to boot. From here, let's look back at the unfortunate players who started in earlier styles and assess the lack of diversity where that large number of charts didn't exist. When you factor this in, it's pretty clear why the skill level of players was much lower back then compared to the players of today. However, this is why random has come to be widely used by higher level players, so it was the only way to keep progressing and improving. Once random was turned on, a single song opened up to thousands of possibilities. By using random, it was as if you were playing a completely different chart altogether, and players of the past were able to obtain that added diversity within songs, which was so readily available today. It really comes down to adding that diversity into the mix to get you reading and reacting over global repetition and memorization. Have you ever noticed that sometimes your first try on a song is much better than your next few attempts at it? If you play the song non-random over and over, you will probably find that your scores will likely plateau and decrease. The reason is after a certain point, muscle memory will start working against you, and instead of actively trying to read and process a chart, you'll simply switch to autopilot and do nothing but move off memorization, which in turn results in less engagement. This is also the main reason why you see many players who don't use random very lacking overall in consistency. Once again, it's due to being familiar with only one kind of pattern for the song and not the rhythm related to a broad spectrum of patterns like players who use random all the time. So as someone from a science background, let's also have a look at the evidence from cognitive theory and explore some of the effects of what using random does to your brain. To explain this, think of non-random like going to work and eating the same thing for lunch every single day, and random being the chef's special, which exotic flavours from faraway lands entice your eyes and fingers into an overwhelming trance. Much like this example, each new pattern is feeding your brain new information and things which are novel, which in turn leads to deeper processing. This in turn forces your brain to start making more neural connections and associations as opposed to simply preserving the ones you have, and it should come as no surprise that these neural pathways are the key to a faster progression. I suppose the question you need to ask yourself from here is, do you want to just preserve what you know and have, or do you want to start building yourself mentally and cognitively to further progress through the game? So as you can see from the various points that I brought up, random is to this day an extremely important option. Of course, I'm not saying random should be turned on from day one and that everyone needs to use it to get started. Obviously there's a certain period where you need to familiarise yourself with the game first, and for this reason I usually only tell people to start using it around the 8s to 10s, when you have a firm grasp of where all the keys are. From that point on in the game, it's an incredible tool for exposing you to new patterns and approaches to the game, as well as helps you flesh out those rhythms and helps you to build consistency. So at the end of the day, the lesson to take from this is very clean and clear. No matter what level you're at with the game, if you want to continue to progress and improve, practice safe 2DX. Use a random. So that's it for this 2DX discussion, and thank you very much for watching. Next video I'll be discussing something a little bit more odd and less direct than the last few topics. In the comments below I want you to write about a bad experience you've had with 2DX and why you felt that way. I know it's a rough topic, but hopefully I can cheer you up with a reply and give you some encouraging advice afterwards. Be sure to check out my other videos and don't forget to like and subscribe. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next 2DX discussion video. Bye bye for now.